always write things as if a judge is going to read them. Now, that's great advice for a lawyer, but it's also just great advice in general.
I do think we all need to learn, because so much of our communications, even with our teams now, are on text, on email, and we're very fast to write these things. If you're angry and you're sending messages, go to bed. Go to bed, send it tomorrow. Workplace law is complex and constantly changing. It can be hard to keep up, and the risk of getting it wrong can be costly for businesses. The Coffee and Law podcast is here to help HR professionals and employers stay informed. We'll cover what's changing and how to navigate real workplace situations and everyday people decisions. So grab your favorite warm drink and join us for engaging, practical, and educational conversations with top experts in workplace and employment law.
This podcast provides high-level general information. The perspectives shared by our guests are for educational purposes and do not constitute legal advice. If you have a specific question or concern, please consult a qualified lawyer.
Hi everyone, it's Amy Davies, founder and CEO of First 30, and also your Coffee and Law podcast host here, to remind you that First 30 offers career transition and outplacement services. So if you have terminations and layoffs coming up, this is a really good way to mitigate risk to your business and help your exiting employees recover from the job loss and get back to work. You can find out more information at www.first30ready.com/outplacement, or you can reach out to me, Amy, AMY, at first30ready.com. All of our programs include live coaching and a year of access. And in a tough job market, that can be very important. Now, back to our show. Welcome back to Coffee and Law. We're going to talk about something kind of scary, actually, the conversations that can get you fired. But before we do that, I want to thank everyone so much for your support. Our little podcast is just taking off with our HR community, which we're so grateful for. So I'll remind you that if you haven't already, please subscribe to the show. And if you're listening, you're welcome, and we invite you to give us a 5-star rating. It does help the show, and we do really appreciate it. And of course, I want to thank our partners, HR Law Canada. And if you haven't had a chance to check them out, I would really recommend taking a look, because they release some amazing articles all about employment law, about current cases happening that you need to be aware of. So you should check them out. Their information will be in the show notes. And of course, I want to thank our amazing producers. As I say, we get asked all the time, who produces this show? And it's a company called Storyfora, and they're just a lot of fun to work with. And every time before we get on the show, we always have a little fun chat with them, which is why we seem already so warmed up and ready to go once we get started. So I thought I'd give a shout out to them. And of course, Neena, thank you and Gowling for your support of the show as well. I have to say, Neena, I cheated on you a little this week because I was in Kitchener and I just had back to back.
Oh,
I know. Everyone was asking me, are you staying with Neena tonight? And I was like, oh, shh, don't tell her. Don't tell her I was here. But our friend Lynn Charlton was like, maybe you could, she's going to give me a room in her house too. So you have competition. But yes, so welcome everyone again. And I wanted to start off, Neena, with a funny story, just because I want to be clear from the get-go that this is a tough topic, right? Because we're all coming from different places. We have a wonderful melting pot here in Canada where we have people from all over the world coming to Canada, and their experience of the world may be very different than ours, and it can be very hard to get used to. But Some of you might know that I lived in England for some time, about 6 years in my 20s. And I was so proud of myself. You know, when you go clothes shopping, you're all proud of your new, what you bought. I was strutting into the office and we're in an open plan. And I shouted out, "Hey, look at my new pants," which to us would just seem like, look at my new, what they call in the UK, as I learned,
Trousers?
trousers. But to them, I was referring to your undergarments. So you can only imagine how many people popped up
Yeah.
from their cubicles to check out what I was talking about. But it was just such an, I mean, we all had a very good laugh over it. It was very innocent. Everyone understood that I didn't know what I was saying. So I want to be very clear that there are times when bad behavior is intentional, and there are times when bad behavior is perceived that way, but there's a very innocent explanation for it. So I wanted to kind of kick off the show by explaining that and understanding that, you know, we are all coming from different places, but what we're going to discuss today is really important for both employees, employers, and HR to be aware of.
Absolutely. So where do you wanna start, Amy?
So, look at my new pen.
Let's not.
No, well, I would just like to start with, what happens in these situations? So we have HR who's probably navigating a lot of this. So you have someone coming to them and saying, "This has happened." They're made aware of a situation. When is there a reason for? When is it a problem? I guess. Like, what are they looking for? What are the signs that something is serious and they need to have conversations and dig deeper?
You know, this is the type of conduct that is the hardest to actually deal with because so much is inextricably linked to culture. And what is
Hmm.
perhaps, I'm going to say, acceptable in a male dominated blue collar workplace may not be acceptable at my law firm. And so it becomes context becomes really important. Now, there are certain things that, HR should be absolutely careful about. So there are some no-go areas. And both the Criminal Code and the Occupational Health and Safety Act make it very clear that threats of violence, absolutely no go. Um, and I don't wanna, like, if somebody listening to the conversation would reasonably perceive that to be, "Yeah, that had a bit of edge up to it." Like, it isn't funny. So, an example I'll give is where, "Why don't we step aside and I'm gonna just, show you who's boss," or, "Why don't we step aside and I'm gonna pulverize you." That type of threat, it's just a no-go.
And so, sorry, let me just ask a question there.
Yeah.
So, if someone makes that kind of threat in the workplace and say they've done all the things, it's known, it's documented, they can prove it happened. Is that like this person must be fired for
Oh,
making
you
that comment?
well, listen, cause is
Well, we are talking, it's what could get you fired.
yes, well, yes. Well, it could get you fired, but I would say that the law of cause is very nuanced, and we've talked about how just cause is very hard to terminate somebody. And if a person has had a reasonably good employment history, and this is a one-off aberration, I think a judge would say there's got to be an alternative to immediate dismissal. Can
Mhm.
we get the person to apologize? Can we get the person to do some training? Is this person going to take responsibility and really commit to not doing it again? And can we do that? And some of the people listening to this may remember that over a decade ago, there was a somewhat inebriated Hydro One employee who essentially photo bombed or camera bombed a journalist and essentially said something extraordinarily vulgar and sexual. Now, in fairness, it was not during working hours. He was clearly off on his personal time, but it was outrageous. His conduct was outrageous, and Hydro One immediately terminated him. What most people don't know is that months later, the labor arbitrator, because he was protected in a labor union, actually reinstated him. Now, the decision's not, I don't, or there was a resolution. So just because the conduct is public, just because the conduct is outrageous, doesn't actually mean that you have cause for termination. You may be able to say, I don't want to put up with that person. Nina, tell me what it's going to cost, under the Employment Standards Act, maybe under the common law to get rid of him, but I don't want him or her around. That's one thing. But to say, do you have cause? To say, off with your head, you're out, we're not paying you anything? One incident? Probably not.
Well, because we think in Canada we have free speech here, right? So where is the line between free speech and you can't say this in your workplace?
Well, free speech is a constitutional concept, which means you have the right to express your opinion, and the government can't punish you for that. The charter doesn't actually prevent your employer from having a different policy. And many employers have policies about what can and cannot be discussed in the workplace. So, free speech, unless you're working for the government, as a constitutional concept, isn't going to help you much. Employers who are smart have respect in the workplace policies. It's mandatory
Uh-huh.
in Ontario, and they'll probably have a code of what can and cannot be said, including harassing comments, bullying comments, sexually suggestive comments that are considered to be inappropriate and for which they reserve the right to discipline and, in extreme cases, terminate. Even in a constitutional context, the criminal code makes it illegal to utter a threat of bodily violence that somebody listening would take seriously. So you can't just go around, threatening to pulverize people. Like if somebody takes that seriously, that's a criminal code offense. And the I was just joking or oh, it's
Oh,
just
that's what I
words,
was gonna ask
you
you.
know, that's a
Yeah, that
defense.
probably
Doesn't work too well.
yeah. Well, you and I were talking offline about a situation I had many years ago in a workplace where a male colleague let me know that his wife was going to be away that weekend and would I like to come visit? And I mean, I did not want to. And I certainly didn't want to be asked that by my colleague. And I did not give a very positive reaction. And then the response was, I was just joking. And I bring that up because I'm sure there are people listening, especially a lot of women who have been in a similar situation like that in the workplace. And what grounds do we have? I did not report that. It made me very uncomfortable. This person made me just very uncomfortable in general, and kind of wish that I had taken some action. So, what would you say to both an employee and an HR professional if they find themselves in a similar type of situation like that in the workplace?
So our laws talk about a course of vexatious conduct. So one
Mhm.
invitation, it's almost like it's a freebie, but I still think it should be reported. The person's not going to get fired for that, or is
Mhm.
unlikely unless there's a whole slew of things that you don't know about in the background. But just
Yeah.
having a talking to, it's not appropriate unless, there's to make that kind of comment in a workplace. Now,
No.
and particularly, I think, if you're talking about a subordinate or somebody who's much more junior in the organization, even if they don't report to you, there is a power imbalance that makes those kinds of conversations really awkward. I don't know if it's true. It might be apocryphal, but I was told that when I started work in a law firm in the late 1980s, the young male lawyers and articling students were all given the "thou shalt not." And it was essentially, "Our legal assistants and our legal staff are way more valuable than you are. Thou shalt not harass them. Thou shalt not sexually solicit them. Thou shalt not be handsy with them. Thou shalt not suggest anything to them, because if they find it offensive, we're just telling you, you are going to be out the door, not them." I don't know if that was apocryphal or not, But it was definitely a message that, here you are, you're this, young thing, you've just graduated from law school, you're a young associate or a young articling student, you're hot stuff, you know everything about law that there is to know, and there's an attractive young, legal assistant, mailroom person, librarian, law paralegal. Keep your hands off 'em.
Yeah. I think just in general in the workplace, keep your hands off is a very good
It was a
rule.
very good piece of advice.
Yes, a very good piece of advice. Outplacement and career transition support make a real difference for employees experiencing terminations or layoffs. Offering these services also reduces legal and reputational risk for employers. All of First 30's outplacement programs include access to a live coach, along with 1 year of access to our career transition portal, job search resources, and much more. Programs start at $985 per participant. You can find information about our programs and pricing at first30ready.com/outplacement or reach out to us anytime at info@first30ready.com. So, is there anything else that you wanted to say about that? Because I have another question specifically related to interviewing, job
Oh, let's
interviews.
go to interviews. I've been asked all the questions.
Oh yeah, I bet because it's for the right reasons. In a lot of cases, it's getting far more complicated to interview folks when they come in the door. And just as a reminder to everyone, I'm sure you watched our very first episode ever where we talked about the changes in 2026. And I think this actually happened before 2026. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Nina, but we have to have 3 years of notes on every interview and every candidate, every interview that we
Yeah,
do,
if
correct?
if you're in Ontario and you're over 25 employees, you have to keep track of your communications and your correspondence with respect to recruitment, including unsuccessful candidates. Logic of that is if they want to bring a human rights complaint, you have the notes to show I chose Amy because of X, Y, and Z, and this other
Yep.
candidate didn't have it. It wasn't because she was black, it wasn't because he was male, it was because Amy was the right candidate. And so it's accountability effectively.
Hmm.
Uh,
Sure.
yes.
But so there are things you can say in job interviews as an employer, as an interviewer, as a talent acquisition specialist that are going to get you in trouble should those things be reported. And I would think that these things are more likely to be reported in a world where there is more compliance required.
Yes, and people are more aware of their rights. They can go and type something in ChatGPT. May not be 100% accurate, but it'll give a sense of their rights. So I recommend when you're doing interviews to actually focus on the essential job duties and craft your questions to determine what do they have that relates to those job duties. Now, I've been guilty of this. You meet a candidate and they have a fascinating background. Um, and you want to learn about that. And it's just on a human level. It's not so much you're a job interviewer, you're human, you're kind of establishing rapport. And it's not uncommon. If you have pictures of your young, cute kids, my son's 25, so he's past the young, cute kid stage. But
He is a very sweet person. I got to meet him
yes,
a
he
few weeks
is.
ago.
He's lovely, but
Yeah.
there is a little the chubby cheek, long past the chubby cheek cute.
Right.
Yeah,
That is
exactly.
the past,
But you
yes.
start talking about kids, and it's you could just hear it coming out of your mouth. Oh, do you have kids? Are and you and let's say that candidate was great, but was not the successful candidate. They're going to wonder if that conversation about children played against them. And so 2 things. I make it clear I'm gonna really focus on the work, of and really plan out and use that same plan for every candidate. And even if, because you know me, I'm a chatty Cathy, I love people, I wanna know about their, like
You do love people and you do want to know about
yeah,
people. Like going back to when we first got to know each
yeah.
other, but I wasn't interviewing for a job at
Yeah,
Gowling.
but
So
it's different, but in a job interview, if I catch myself maybe veering off, I was trained and I thought this was a brilliant tip. So, you know what? I'm digressing. I'm really sorry about that. Why don't we focus on the interview? Maybe we'll have a chance to discuss other things at another point in time. But to catch yourself, and even say, even if it sounds a bit abrupt, say, "Oh, we're digressing," because
Mhm.
I'd love to know about, where your parents came from. And in certain cultures, including my own, we do this sort of, like kind of geography. And I remember
You're building the family
I'm
tree
building
and
the planning
seeing
tree,
where
and
the
I've got a
branches extend.
client who, he's comes from the same part of India. Oh, they come from, but like, where did their ancestors come from? Well, in Bangladesh. And he says, well, everybody comes from Bangladesh. Where in Bangladesh? Oh, a small village near Dhaka. And says, well, that could be anything. Which small village? And like, literally, we were going down. And then he said, oh, well, that's my village too. That's where my ancestors came from. And that's a typical conversation. Now, that's culturally very common. It's very common to find out about your caste and subcaste, stuff that we just don't do in Canada. And so, even if there's a little itsy parts of my brain that's kind of tempted to go there, I just say,
Mhm.
"Oh, we digress. Let's focus on what
Mhm,
we're here
mhm.
for today." I just want to keep an eye on the clock and keep, really get through my interview questions. And somebody taught me that during a training, and I thought that was like a really good verbal trick because we're all human. We can all sort of trip, but we just want to make sure that I don't want to turn interview processes into some kind of mechanical thing, because you are trying to make that human connection. But I also don't want to veer into conversations that make people uncomfortable and question, oh, did I get that job because of ethnicity? Did I not get that job because of my plans to have kids? I don't want to go there.
I feel like we need a whole episode just on job interviews because, like all the natural questions come up like, well, what if someone's brought up their kids? What do you do then? Do you just veer away from that conversation? But we'll talk about that another time because I think that is a really
But
important
but
topic.
but can I just, because that conversation can get you into trouble, and I've had people say this to me. Well, I wasn't trying to do it. I just wanted to make sure that they understood this job was 7:30 to 4, that there wasn't a lot of flex, and if they have kids, I wanted to know whether or not they can make that schedule because it's an assembly line and I can't accommodate it, or it's frontline reception and they're on the morning shift, right? I think it's
Sure.
completely appropriate to ask the question, this job requires a 7:30 on time sharp start. Is there anything that is going to impede that? Is there any accommodation that you're going to maybe need? Because that's very important to us, and get
Mhm.
it out in the open that that 7:30 start is really important. I've had people ask about children, says, "Well, what I was really trying to ask about is whether or not they could travel because this is a sales job." Remember when we did sales jobs in person as opposed to by Teams
Yes.
and stuff?
Mhm.
So they're gonna
Yes.
be on the road, like probably 2 weeks out of each month. So ask the
Yeah.
question, our salespeople are typically at our clients or traveling, Sunday night to Friday afternoon. Is that going to be an issue for you? Because that's really important to us. Have you ever done a job with that kind of significant traveling component? How do you deal with the fact that it's really hard, to keep in touch with the office when you're on the road? Not like it is today. I'm just giving you historical examples.
Is it required in a job ad to state the percentage of time that you'll need to travel? Because I do know people in sales jobs that still do have to travel a certain percentage of the time.
I don't know if it goes down to a percentage, but it's very common if there's a significant travel component to say it's a significant travel component, and also if it's a travel component that's international, to make it clear that that is expected, because there's certain people, maybe they've got a criminal conviction from, 15 years ago. Maybe it's not
Yeah.
relevant to me, but it may be very relevant to international immigration authorities, or depending on where you are in your work permit slash citizenship process, it may not be appropriate for you to travel based on legal advice just because there are certain complexities there. And so I recommend that if you have a travel job, make it clear. And also the extent of it. Like some of the jobs are literally local in Ontario. That's a different consideration than when it's overnight and, far away and in different geographies.
Okay, so now let's get back to, I should say, I digress. No, it's all interesting and important things for people to know. So now you're in a situation, maybe you've done it. Maybe a person who's a business partner, you're in HR, one of your business partners has done this. They've said it. They've said the thing. It's out. The toothpaste is out of the bottle, right? Now, what do we do if we realize we've made a mistake, or as HR we realize someone has made a mistake and we need to help them because it was an honest error. It just came out because we're human.
I still believe in the power of a sincere apology as the first route. Our laws on harassment talk about as a course of action. So unless it's something egregious, a single slip is not considered harassment. It's not considered grounds for termination, but it can, as you know, sour the relationship. So a sincere apology is often the right thing to do. Where you have problems is where somebody doesn't see their conduct as wrong. And maybe it wasn't
Mhm.
intended. There's a famous case, actually, a friend of mine represented the employer, Mr. Husko. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right. And there were some incidents and it was investigated, but I'm not sure I would have come to the same conclusion, but it's water under the bridge. But
Mhm.
it was like I think it was like somebody had to get approval from a manager and they were being evasive or difficult to reach or not responsive. And this Mr. Huska said to the junior female, "You're just going to have to sit on him." And the woman who heard it from a sexualized component. I'm not sure I agree with that, but she heard it that way. One of the things that would have helped is just a sincere apology. When I
Mhm.
use that phrase, I didn't mean anything by it. I just meant that he's really hard to get a hold of, and you're just going to have to
Mhm.
stick to it and really be a pest because that's the only way you're going to get that signature. I realize now, because I've listened to HR, that there might have been a sexual component or you heard something sexualized. I absolutely didn't mean that. I'm mortified that you could think that, right? I think that if that conversation had occurred,
Yeah,
it wouldn't have gone up to the Court of Appeal. But the problem was he didn't want to apologize because he said, I didn't mean anything sexual. Why should I apologize for that? And I
sure.
get that, but sometimes it's not just what you did, it's like how it was received. And none of us, or most of us, really don't want to offend and hurt people. But we could have used an expression, and particularly in Canada, where we have newcomers and people who learned English, maybe in the UK, to use your pants example,
Sure.
or in India, where words may have slightly different cultural contexts. Maybe words are
Mhm.
just heard a bit differently. And so you apologize. And that really makes a
Absolutely, yeah.
huge difference. Like, practically speaking, I don't get to see those cases because HR has dealt with it. I only get to see the cases where somebody says, "Hey, I was right and I'm not going to apologize. And you shouldn't even be uh, addressing this with me."
And, we're talking about so much of the things people say out loud, yet so much of our communication is in written form now. And, I do think that we could all use training on, how to manage our
Okay,
correspondence
so
better.
another person said, always write things as if a judge is going to read them. Now, that's great advice for a lawyer, but it's also just great advice in general. And yesterday, I had a really good settle like, essentially, we took a very tough position. That's not something it's not uncommon for me, and I got a counteroffer that I thought was really reasonable. Like, just, yes, there are some changes and differences,
Mhm.
but, we should not be like, this should not go to litigation. This should settle now. Okay? It's,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? I'm really happy. And I almost wrote the phrase, "He caved," in the negotiations. And I thought, I don't you know what? I really respect this lawyer on the other side.
Mhm. Mhm.
If for some reason that email has to go out in public, it's solicitor-client privilege, but it's the client's privilege. They may want to waive it as their understanding of the settlement. Do I want this lawyer with whom I have a great relationship, who is someone I negotiate with frequently, seeing an email in which I crow and brag, "Oh, he caved in the
Mhm.
negotiation." Instead, what I said is Mr. So and so has, provided a very reasonable counter offer. And although it's a bit different from our last position, I strongly recommend you accept it because if he sees that or a judge sees that, that is perfectly appropriate.
Yes, it's so I do think we all need to learn because so much of our communications, even with our teams now, are on text, on email, and we're very fast to write these things. I would just say take a pause and reread. If you're angry and you're sending messages, go to bed. Go to bed, send it tomorrow, or use your AI partner. Put that message through them and say, "Can you take the emotion out of this, or can you help me make this professional?" And it's actually a very good tool for that, if you've trained it properly. But even so, I still think it's quite a good tool to do something like that. So I would say just pause. We don't, we're always so quick to want to respond to things and say things, and it can help just to take a few breaths.
Yeah, it does. And rereading your own stuff and sometimes rereading your own stuff out loud and you're going, ooh,
Yes.
ooh, ooh.
But read it in monotone without
Yeah,
expression
okay. Yeah.
too.
Well, AI could do that for you too, but you could do that and you go and you wince, right? Like you
Absolutely.
wince. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So now, Nina, we could talk about this as like so many topics. We could go on and on forever, but I really want you to spill some tea before we go. So any of you who are just joining us for the first time, we always have a segment at the end where we spill the tea, and it can be fun, it could be shocking, but something like story that that you think people will benefit from being aware of, but might
Yeah.
maybe a little lighter.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. So this is maybe not a little lighter, but
Okay.
as I said earlier, really we need to be careful about conversations with employees when it deals with human rights grounds. And I think one
Mhm.
of the worst cases, and I think he was trying to be funny, but it was
Mm.
a pregnant woman who was seeking accommodation and like was finding certain aspects of a kind of a warehouse production type of setting difficult. You're on your feet a lot and it's not, gotta, and I think,
I get
yeah,
it.
it's tough. Like
Yes.
we've both had kids. And he made some comment about, I don't know why you're asking me. I'm not the one who knocked you up. And
Ugh.
that did not go well. First of
Yes.
all, just from a human rights perspective, she was asking for accommodation. He didn't enter into the discussion about accommodation. He claims, and I believe him because I know him, that he said it in a funny sort of way. And of course, he was going to, deal with it. He was just trying, she was very upset and stressed about it. And he was trying to make a joke, and it was a joke that went flat. But she apparently just was shocked. I mean, yes, she was hormonal and upset, but it was just a terrible thing to say. Luckily for me, the company was willing to accommodate and he was
Mhm.
willing to apologize.
Oh, that's good.
But it's an
Yes.
example of where something that, was meant to be funny just went sideways. And and I'm glad that we were able to fix it. But he truly was shocked at the blowback from the comment. Now, he had a lot of women, including, I still remember her, somebody who had no management authority, but was sort of like the mother hen of this, of the, did I hear you said such and such to so and so? And like, you're an insensitive, like I'm sitting here going, okay, maybe she should be. But she told him off. And she was so much more effective, mother hen was much more effective than me or the HR manager.
Oh, wow.
So we
That's
know where the
amazing.
power was. It was like with the mother hen.
Yes.
So I tell that
Yeah.
story just because good people can say things that they, wish they hadn't or can get them into legal trouble. And so maybe the two best tips, Amy, take some time and review and apologize when you need to apologize and do it sincerely. Like his apology was a sincere apology,
Oh, that's
and it
good.
made a huge difference.
That's good. Yeah, I've been there. I a person who occasionally thinks I'm funny, and
You
I'll
are.
say something and make a joke. I did that in the workplace once. It was nothing that ever would have got me in trouble. It was just a person that I said it to, who's a friend, was very offended. I just apologized immediately. He had messaged me to say he wasn't very happy with my joke. I went right to his office and I explained that I was so sorry. I failed. I didn't really see why he was upset, but I was empathetic to the fact he was upset, and it was my responsibility and I took it, and wow, it made a huge difference. But it's just like you try to be funny and sometimes it just doesn't. We all think we have a great sense of humor, right? We're
Yeah,
funny.
yeah. Yes,
Sometimes we're not.
exactly. And I will tell you that even smart people can get tripped on it. There's a very important case that came out in the context of investigations, and the complainant said one of the things that really bothered him was the use of the N word in the workplace. The
Yeah.
investigator essentially uses the full N word when asking questions of this complainant. Complainant says, "Look, I'm really uncomfortable with you using the full N word," right? And
Yes.
the investigator didn't stop. Now,
Oh, come
yeah,
on.
and so, and he's a trained investigator, but it just meant that the complainant lost complete confidence in the investigators, uh, you know, professional judgment and
Yes.
impartiality. And
Yeah.
so,
Yes.
when I read that case, I just was like, "Oh my." Like, you're a trained investigator. One of the things, your tools is to build rapport with the witness or the complainant so that they
Mhm.
are able to tell you what happened to them, and you are making your use of language a barrier to getting that information. So, yes, words can get you into trouble.
Absolutely, they can. Well, listen, thank you for your words today. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience has too. So, you can, if you're interested in speaking with Neena, if you have specific issues and you need legal advice, because of course, this is not legal advice, this is Neena's perspective. She doesn't know your business and your specific situation. You can send her a message. Her email is in the show notes. You can always look her up on the Gowling WLG site, which I often have to do because I'm like, oh my goodness, where's your headshot again? I'll go get the most recent one there. But thank you so much, Neena, for taking the time to share your perspective and expertise with us. I really appreciate it, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Absolutely, and thanks. This was a lot of fun.